Well, I am Barbara Thomas now, but when I lived in Kenwood, my name was Brinson. And my father and mother built a house at 3236 8th Avenue North about 1927. And they had lived in an apartment prior to that time and were able to build a home. And as far as I know, the house is still there and still in good standing. As all these years it's lasted. But when we moved to Kenwood, we were one of very few people out there. There were empty lots around us. There was a house on the same side of the street in the block, but that was all. And I don't have any souvenirs from that house except these two doorknobs. And the lavender one came from the screen door to the front porch, and the larger clear one was on the front door leading into the living room. Someone told me, and I don't know whether it's a fact or not, but the lavender one is that color because of the sun, that originally that probably was clear. But that's all I have left of that house, and although the house itself is still there. I hope the new owners won't want these, don't you, Roy? I mean, it'd be terrible if they came and took them away. I love the screen porch because the green tile floor was always cool in the summertime, and we didn't have air conditioning. We had a swing on the porch at one point, and so in the summer, that was where I played dolls or paper dolls, whatever, out on the cold floor. There weren't a lot of children. I had one friend who lived at the corner of 7th Avenue and 33rd. She was a year older than I. We would ride tricycles together. The neighbors were great, the new neighbors that came, and the area eventually filled with houses. And as my sister is 6 years younger than I am, and when she came along, more children were living in the neighborhood. We were talking recently about the different children that she had played with as she grew up. 34th Street, or US 19, which is so heavily trafficked today, at that time was a creek. And it only had crossings at 5th Avenue and 9th Avenue. To get to town, if you didn't have a car, you had to walk to 28th Street and catch the trolley. And so as this little trolley would go up the hill, it would sway to side. And that's how we got to town. And it also, when I was in high school, that was transportation for a lot of the high school students, because St. Pete High was the only high school in the city at that time.
Well, if you lived in Kenwood, you obviously went to St. Pete High.
And we both went to St. Pete High.
We did.
Of course, I went 30 years before you did, but nevertheless.
But the school hadn't changed much.
That's
the
right.
teachers changed, and some of the clubs and the social activities, but the architecture remained pretty much intact over the years. And if you walk through there today, they've kept the historical presence.
I knew Roy Adams before he was born, and I knew his father before he was married. And so I knew Roy when he came into this world, and I've known him ever since.
I am entrenched in the Kenwood neighborhood because my parents were married at 2834 8th Avenue North in 1955, October 10th, which was where my grandmother lived. And of course, my mother obviously lived there too. So that's kind of where it all started, was at 2834 8th Avenue North. When I left the garage apartment when I was 2 and moved into 2940 7th Avenue North in 1960, I stayed there till 83. Kenwood, to me growing up, was your typical all-American neighborhood. A lot of families, nice houses, not a high-end part of town like perhaps, the Brightwater, Snell Isle part of St. Petersburg, but houses just as nice, but more in kind of the mid-city, middle America was growing up there, and my family was kind of that background. So, we were kind of with people in that neighborhood that had worked in similar kind of jobs. We didn't know it. We didn't know it was, of course, historic at the time. It was just the neighborhood where we grew up. Kenwood was deemed very safe. It felt safe, and it really was safe. It was a different era that we lived in. We could all be out playing with our friends, and a lot of those friendships we've kept. A lot of those folks, they either live here still or their family still lives here. Some still have family in the same house. We were better known from our neighborhood for what was around us back then than we were saying we didn't have the Historic Kenwood flags and all that. I'm proud nowadays when somebody says, "Where do you grow up?" By golly, I do say, I grew up in Historic Kenwood.